We've never had a time in our history where we've seen mass exodus of Canadians having enough and leaving the country.
Why I left Canada.
I don't see my future in Canada.
Why I left.
Now there's personal, political, and economic reasons to leave permanently. And the biggest reason, I'll just cut right to it, is Justin Trudeau's tyrannical grasp on where the country is heading, which is soft, very soft.
I like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind.
If you're wanting to escape Canada permanently or just for the winters like I am, this video's for you. Matt, how do I live in the US? Do I need a permit? Do I have to be a citizen? I'm gonna break down everything you need to know, and no, you do not need to be a multi-millionaire like I am. And you don't need a crazy business owning 150 rental properties like I did. You just need key specific information on putting your escape plan together, and I'm gonna give it all to you. Where is this mass exodus going? Portugal? Bali? Hawaii? Well, guess what? It's Florida. Canadians have been buying real estate in Florida for decades for investment purposes or for themselves during the winter. Now, after the lockdowns, political theater, and virtue signaling, I personally had enough and we bought a house in Florida and I've moved my family there to live there during the winters. We Canadians just don't take responsibility for where our country is heading and the fact that we elected a moron over and over again. As we go through this video, you're gonna see that it's actually very, very easy to get ahead and live life on your terms, become wealthy, because the reality is Canadians, and I've seen this throughout my entire life, love to beat up on the United States. We make it seem like we're so much more superior, we're more advanced of a species. And in some ways, I mean, maybe. The US does have some serious problems with their gun laws, violent crime, it's totally out of control, that is for sure. But there are also many, I would say more positive things about the US that we don't have here in Canada. One of the major differences about escaping and living in the US is that it's not one country, kind of like Canada is, where we have our laws across the entire country and they're pretty much identical. In the US, it's kind of like living in 50 different countries. Every state has their own laws, their own tax rates, the way they operate, the way they do things. So it's really interesting on how it runs. So for example, if you lean left on politics and you want to live in warm weather, maybe living in California is for you.
Some of us settled in Oregon, in Nevada, and in California.
Or if you still lean left but you like the 4 seasons, maybe living in New York or Pennsylvania state is for you. Now on the flip side, if you lean a little more right and you also like warm weather, maybe living in Florida or Texas is for you. And again, if you still lean right but you like mountains and kind of the 4 seasons weather, maybe living in something like Nevada or Utah is for you. You can kind of design your life. There's so many more choices, unlike Canada where yes, Alberta is obviously a little different from Ontario, but not really. Economically, criminal policy, fiscal policy, it's all the exact same. Look, being a Canadian, you are already granted 6-month visas for free to go to the US whenever you want. So for 6 months a year, you can live in the US, no questions asked. It's part of your right for holding a Canadian passport. So for myself, we live in our Florida home in Naples, Florida for about 4.5 months a year during the winter. And for right now, that's all I need. It's totally cool. We love coming back to Canada for the summers, and then we travel around Europe usually in September, October, November, and then we leave for Florida. So this lifestyle for us right now is working really well. If you're totally done with Canada and you just want to get the fuck out of here, the best visa for you is the E2 visa. It is the most popular by far. So what this is an investor visa. And the easiest way by far, from knowing so many people and so many of my friends who have gotten it, is by investing in an already existing business and spending at least $100,000 on that business. So most common people are buying hair salons, they're buying construction businesses, they're buying laundromats. And what's really interesting is that there's laundromats and car washes like on every corner, it seems like, in America where we travel. So I would assume there are a lot of people just investing in these easy businesses just to get their way into the US, and then they're gone. Now you can also start your own business where you don't have to spend up to $100,000. Just from you starting a business and having a plan, that is usually enough to get in. I've even heard many times, and I don't recommend this, but there's cases of people starting a landscaping business. They buy all the tools, the weed whackers, the lawnmowers, the trucks, the trailers, and they go, look, I just spent 75 grand on all this stuff. I already have 2 employees that are starting on Monday. Here's my business plan. Can I get in? And of course, because they're providing so much value to the US, no problem. Here's your visa. You can stay for 5 years, sometimes even 10 years if you plead your case good enough, and they turn around and sell all of that landscaping business and do whatever they actually wanted to do and live in the US kind of for free. But I say this because getting an E2 visa, a permanent resident status, is not nearly as hard as you think or a lot of people talk about it. So a lot of people think, well, what if I'm a real estate investor? What if I'm buying a bunch of properties? Can I use that as my business? And the answer is no. The US government is much smarter than that. They understand that you buying rental properties is a passive type business, and they don't want passive, they want you to be an active type business and actively providing value to the US. But there's a workaround around that. If you are a real estate investor and you plan on buying a bunch of properties, you can start a property management company, you can start a construction business, especially if you're a flipper and you plan to flip a bunch of properties. It's always better to hire your own in-house employees than hire a bunch of contractors. And that's really as easy as it is. Now, obviously you want to hire a lawyer that specializes with cross-border citizenship, but that's the process in a nutshell. It is much, much easier than everybody makes it seem to be. If you have 100 grand USD, basically you're in if you're working with the right attorney.
Perfect.
Now, moving on to the structure and document side of things, you don't need any specific permissions or documents to invest in the United States. You can buy any businesses you want without getting first permission. You can just do it right now. Now, what I will say is that you will most likely though need to form an LLC, which is always a really good idea because you get way better tax treatment, way better liability reasons, of course. But what's really interesting opposed to Canada is that the mortgage brokers and the lenders in the US will actually require you to form an LLC. They won't give you a mortgage unless you have one. Now, this is absolutely amazing because in Canada, if you want to buy real estate in a corporation, it's like pulling teeth. Oh my God, it's impossible. Your interest rate's gonna be 10 times higher. You gotta provide all these documents and tax statements and credit card statements. It's an absolute nightmare to buy a property in a corporation. In America, because they're so capitalistic, they're like, not only do I get what you're doing, investing in real estate, which is really cool by the way, I'm gonna make you form an LLC. That's the only way I'm gonna lend you money. Super cool. Properties are way friggin' cheaper because the country is so much bigger. They don't have the supply and demand constraints that we have in Canada. There's more than enough real estate to go around, so there's not these crazy bidding wars and bidding up prices. So buying real estate is so much cheaper. Not to mention, if you're buying in the proper states that I'm always talking about, your taxes are almost 0% in that state. And the landlord-tenant board rules are absolutely amazing. It's like the Wild West. It's the way it should be. If you own the property and you're on title, you call the shots. In states like Florida and Texas specifically, if you want to raise the rent because you realize you're undervalued, raise the rent. Give 60 days notice, raise it to whatever you want. If you have a tenant not paying rent, you think they're gonna stay in that property for months and months, up to a year, like you're seeing in Ontario and Canada? No, they get kicked out in like a month maximum. No appeals, no stories, the sheriff comes and drags them out. You didn't pay rent? Get out. This is capitalism, baby. As you being a foreigner, you are most likely gonna get a Dscr mortgage, a debt service coverage ratio. And what that basically means is that the banks and lenders in the US don't give a shit about your credit rating in Canada. They don't care about your income taxes. They don't care about any of that. So how they get around that is this debt service coverage ratio. And what it means is when you buy the property and it's conditional, they send out an appraiser to appraise the property just like they do in Canada, but they do a second appraisal while they're there for the income approach. And how it works in a nutshell is if your expenses on this property are gonna be $2,000 a month, let's say, for your mortgage, interest, taxes, etc., they do an appraisal based on what would this property rent for if it was a long-term rental. And if you're investing in Florida, which is super cool, they even look at Airbnb. What would this property rent for if it was on Airbnb? So if your expenses, like I said, are $2,000 on this property, but the Airbnb rent in Florida is obviously amazing, and let's say it's $8,000 a month, based on comparable properties around that they look at on Airbnb, and they go, yep, this property would probably rent for $8,000 a month. You get the mortgage. It's as simple Simple as that. It's a business transaction. They don't care who you are. They don't care about your tax statements. They don't care about your credit score. None of that. Your job, who cares? All these banks look for is a 30% down payment being a foreigner, where the money came from, so you have to prove that it's not drug money and that you moved it from this account in Canada to this US account in America, whatever.
I got me a milli, I did it legit.
And that appraisal. Will it rent for more than what the expenses are? If the answer is yes to all three of those questions, you get the mortgage. Simple. Taxation. So if you form an LLC, like I said, the banks will require you will pay double taxation. Now, I explain this in detail on my channel a lot, but real quick, double taxation isn't what you think it is. For example, corporate tax in Florida is 5% and the IRS federal tax is 20%. So essentially you're paying 25% to tax it. Now, if you're at a 50% tax rate in Canada, it's not like you pay another 50% after that, bringing you to a 75% tax rate. It's not how it works. If you're indeed at a 50% tax rate for your personal income in Canada, Trudeau will say, hey, you've already paid 25% to the IRS, I'm just gonna bump you up to that maximum 50% line. So essentially you're paying the exact same tax whether you buy a property in Ontario, in Alberta, or in the United States. Now, if you want to get real savvy, and this is way bigger than this video, you can do the structure that I have, which is a 3-tiered structure that totally alienates double taxation. I only pay tax in the US. It's almost like I'm an American citizen. I don't get charged tax from Canada as well. I only pay that US tax and that's it. Now, breaking all of that down is for another video, or you can always book a strategy coaching session with me below in the description, all the courses that I have, of course. Now, I'll go over some common mistakes, and in fact, it's really only one for this video, and that is that thinking this is all so much harder than it is. I know it must seem like a lot when you haven't really done it and gone through the process of buying something in the US, but honestly, it's so friggin' easy. It's just get your head out of the clouds and just do it. It's literally almost no different than buying a property in Canada. It's the exact same process. And honestly, Canada is just dead, dude. When it comes to running a business, investing in real estate, taxes, like Canada is dead. It's no longer a place to do business. It's no longer a place to grow your wealth, to live a life of freedom. It's dead. And the reality is, if you do want freedom for you and your family, you need to have money. Your family depends on it. Simple as that. So if you want to learn how to make money, how to run a sweet business, and most importantly, how to invest in real estate, smash that subscribe button. It's all I ask for, and I'm going to teach you pretty much everything you need to know to be a multi-millionaire real estate investor. And if you want to expedite your process to getting super wealthy, check out the links below. I got all my courses, coaching calls, my group coaching program, which is such a dirty price. Get into all of those and let's get you wealthy ASAP. I'll see you in the next video.